سلام عليكم ورحمة الله. هي حرب المياه مطالعة جيوسياسية وتقنية متعلقة بالقانون الدولي والوثائق تكشف عن خطط ومكائد في غير زمن إلى اليوم، وجلها قائم على السيطرة على منابع المياه في المنطقة العربية، وما مدى علاقتها بوثيقة عوديد ينون في هذا السياق. مع نيلوفر بهاجوات أستاذة القانون من الهند نسلط الضوء على ما تكشف عنه هذه الدراسة من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. لعل دراسة أجراها مركز البحوث المشتركة للمفوضية الأوروبية تقول إن آثار تغير المناخ وعدد السكان المتزايد سيؤديان إلى المزيد من الشح في الموارد، وهذا بدوره قد يؤدي إلى عدم الاستقرار الإقليمي والاضطرابات الاجتماعية. وأشارت الدراسة إلى العديد من النقاط الساخنة في العالم، حيث من المرجح أن تندلع صراعات قائمة على القضايا السياسية المائية. إذن الحرب وصراع السيطرة على المياه ومنابعها يحتدم في منطقتنا ويتفاعل اليوم أكثر، ولعل مؤتمر نهر الحصبان الوزاني الذي عقد مؤخرا في العاصمة اللبنانية بيروت يأتي في هذا السياق، حيث يطرح موضوع تقاسم الحصص المائية في النهرين مشاكل مختلفة الجوانب، فهما ينبعان في لبنان ويسير كل منهما مسافة معينة ثم يلتقيان ويدخلان إلى فلسطين المحتلة ليلتقيا بعد ذلك مع روافد نهر الأردن الذي يشكل الحدود الدولية بين المملكة الأردنية الحالية وفلسطين المحتلة. وهكذا فإن مصالح لبنان وفلسطين والأردن تتشابك حول الحصبان والوزاني، ولكن مع وجود كيان إسرائيلي محتل الأمور تصبح أكثر تعقيدا وخبثا. نيلوفر بهاجوات القاضية الهندية ونائبة رئيس الرابطة الهندية للمحامين ورئيس محكمة الشرق الأوسط الخاصة تقدم مطالعة هامة عن مشكلة المياه في لبنان ومحيطه ومطامع إسرائيل ومشاريعها في المنطقة، وتشرح هذا الصراع بنقاطه الرئيسية، وتشرح خطة عوديد ينون في هذا السياق وما الذي يجري واقعا.
Necessary and it's timely that this conference was convened in Lebanon. It's my viewpoint that it was an issue which was very serious because unknown to the world at large, the real cause of the successive wars in the region, the repeated aggression by Israel, was for the control of water resources, fresh water resources, and both upstream and downstream, because it was part of the World Zionist Organization's plan from the very inception.
To control the waters.
From the 19th century, yes. To control the waters.
The water courses.
The water courses, the rivers of Lebanon, Litani, as well as Wazani, Hasbani, the Golan Heights, West Bank, and
the occupied Golan.
And
yes.
Because they had got expert reports. The reason was that the World Zionist Organization had commissioned reports, hydraulic reports, and those reports had stated that the water resources of what the future Zionist entity or Jewish entity was to be created would not be adequate to sustain an population
extra
of 4
settlers.
million whom they desired should migrate from Europe to this region in order for this Zionist or Jewish entity to subserve the purpose of the British Empire.
4 million extra people coming from Europe into Israel.
Yes.
Yes.
That was the projected plan.
Yes.
And for the 4 million immigration of 4 million Europeans into the area would require would change the demography of the region and would require extra water resources, which the area of Palestine did not have. And it was a relatively arid area. Because of this, a strategy was conceived that they would finally want to expand the boundaries and capture the entire watershed of the Jordan River basin, upstream, downstream, all the lakes of Upper Galilee,
yes,
and the entire water resources of the entire Jordan River basin and the Litani River.
Now, the European colonial Zionist project, which you talked about for takeover of the water resources of Lebanon and the water courses of the region, commenced at the end of the 19th century. When we talk about the war for controlling the water, what is the real issue about here in this sense?
The real issue is, and here I would like to refer to the Yinun plan.
We will. I will ask you about it,
Yes.
and then we will dissect it point by
You
point.
see, the first document which I would like to refer to in the context of this plan and the plot, because whenever we are referring to an issue, we should advance evidence. Israel is actually a colonial imperial state, which is a proxy state, was conceived and plotted as a proxy state for the British Empire and the future Anglo-American financial empire. And the first evidence and document which we have, which I have referred to in the paper, is the letter which was written by Wiseman to Lord Curzon, who was the successor of the infamous Lord Balfour. And he writes in this document that the French don't understand. The Treaty of Versailles and the Anglo-French Agreement has not given us the boundaries which we desired, which is the Litani, the Vazani, the Hasbani, the Golan Heights, and the entire Jordan River basin. And if we are not given those borders, then how do we best serve? Then we will not be able to serve the empire. We will not be of no use to anyone, because we will not be able to sustain the population required to serve the interests of empire. This is the first document. So most people do not understand. They see Israel as independent and separate, whereas actually it was an extension of the British Empire, followed by, after the First World War, it became an extension of the Anglo-American Zionist empire, financial empire. And at the same time, the Zionists became very powerful in the United States because they set up the Federal Reserve, which is not a government bank. It was a private bank which was set up by British bankers, including British Zionist bankers like Rothschild, and also American bankers, leading bankers in America who were Zionists and who were in the forefront of the movement to create a Zionist or Jewish entity in the region to control the entire region. Simultaneously, you must remember that oil was discovered. This plan was set afoot when oil was discovered in the region. And it was necessary for these empires to have this entity to control the resources of the Arab world. So there was direct collaboration for the forced migration of European Jews into Palestine. So suddenly you find that before 1931, you find about 132,000 Jews had migrated over a long period. Say about 30 years or so, slowly, steadily, land was purchased from those Palestinian farmers willing to sell. But between 31 to 39, the figure doubles and triples. Because of this clause, property being confiscated, that means you're pauperized, will be released 42% only if you migrate to Palestine.
So it's in a one way or another a kind of coercive
measure. It was a coercive measure.
Forcing the Jews of Europe to go.
And the Zionist organizations were financially benefiting because 42% was to be released to the European Jews who migrated, and another couple of percentage was to be given to the Jewish agency to import German goods into Palestine, into the British Mandate of Palestine, from which the Jewish agency could make a profit.
Right. Allow me to stop you now, Dr. Nilüfer Bhagwat, and then for a short break, and then afterwards we're going to detail on the عوديد Yonen's plan to, vis-a-vis this region, and not only our part of the world, but also your part of the world, but after the break. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. كيف تعد خطة عوديد ينون التي تتمحور حول تقسيم المنطقة إلى دويلات أو شظايا دول من العالم العربي إلى تركيا وإيران وباكستان حتى الهند مرتبطة بمشروع السيطرة على منابع المياه؟ نيلوفر بهاجوات القانونية والقاضية تشرح هذه الخطة وتفاصيلها.
Israel, a Zionist entity, has been allowed to operate with impunity. The normal rules of international law, whether it's customary or the UN Charter, which is the multilateral treaty, or conventions, Israel has never accepted. And as has been analyzed by professors of international law, Israel is a lead state in violating resolutions of the Security Council and General Assembly. Over decades of operating with impunity resulted in a lawless state. And the عوديد Yonen's plan is an open declaration of that lawlessness. Because what it argues is that we shall do to the region, the Arab world as a whole, to Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and on to India, what we have done, the same strategy that we've adopted to bring the West Bank and Gaza to their knees, we will adopt the military strategy of disproportionate violence and force. And we will adopt what we have done to Lebanon. The 1982 obliteration of cities is what we shall adopt for this plan. The Arab world is completely ignorant of what we really are. And this, the plan, when it says that the Arab world is ignorant, they are referring to the fact that the Arab world saw Israel as Israel. They did not see Israel or the Zionist entity as an extension of the Anglo-American financial empire which had replaced the British Empire. British Empire is a part of the Anglo-American financial empire. It merges with the Anglo-American financial empire. The Arab world didn't see it like that. They saw Zionism, they saw Israel as a separate Zionist entity. If they had understood that this is an extension of the imperialist interests of these powers, they would have been much more careful than they were and far more politically alert. The plan even goes on to state that even the American people don't know what we really are. Because you see, when we analyze, when we refer to the United States government and its imperialistic policy, we are referring to the class of people who are in power. That is the political elite. When we refer to Britain, when we refer to policies of Great Britain, we refer to the policies of the ruling elite in power. And basically these are the bankers, the financial and multinational interests. So he says the rest of the people of the United States don't know what we are and what we are up to. That we are actually implying that we are actually an extension of the financial empire. The United people citizens don't know that. And he goes on to say that we must take advantage of this ignorance, this confusion about what we really are. And we must immediately implement this plan, because all these countries whom I'm referring to in the paper, right, from the Arab world to Turkey, Iran, Pakistan and India,
Iraq,
they are very weak societies. They are ethnically divided. They have religious factions. They are highly divided, and they will easily fall a prey to this design that we must carve them up into statelets. Iraq was sought to be divided into a Sunnistan, a Shiastan and Kurdistan.
Yes.
Now that was defeated. It's another aspect, because a different kind of geopolitics emerged after 2003, which they had not expected would emerge. But this is an example of what is the endeavor. Similarly, as you know, what has happened in Turkey. Now, the Turkish role has been in the region has been very negative, to say the least. From Libya to Syria, the kind of destruction that has taken place, the kind of so-called fighters and so-called people who have been funded and introduced.
That area.
But latterly, President Erdogan has realized that his country is also on the chopper block. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we all know what has happened. That fundamentalist organizations of a fascistic kind have actually practically ripped Pakistan apart. That they are still holding is because the military holds Pakistan. But the kind of tendencies there have been to fracture that society are visible. As far as India is concerned, there is no military presence, no Zionist military presence, but there is in terms of the kind of security equipment sought to be dumped on India, the kind of influence they have, particularly on the BJP and RSS parties, and the kind of covert presence which is there.
Intelligence
presence which is there in India. And for example,
so
my view is that a great deal of what is happening in the valley,
in Kashmir,
in particular after the BJP has come to power, is a sinister development which is almost promoting a fracture or a statelet. Now that political parties in a country would collaborate with Zionism against its own national interests, would alarm many people in many regions. But we know the nature of covert operations which takes place. And in my paper, I have referred to an Israeli source, to Jeff Harper, who in his book has described that Israel's diplomatic victories are directly related to its covert security and weapons program, export of weapons to many countries, and that is done through clandestine methods, to covert methods, excluding parliamentary supervision and control.
So this is the sense of the عوديد Yinon's plan.
That Israel should emerge as a regional hegemon. Already it is a pivot and is being used in countries both in Africa and in Asia, as I have described. It's also being used as a pivot in Africa.
Right.
In East Africa.
My last question for you in this sense, Dr. Bhagwat, what is the way forward? How can this matter be cleared out and resolved when most of Arab regimes today, unfortunately, are running fast and swiftly to normalize ties with the Israeli apartheid-occupying state?
The way to move forward, in my opinion, is to expose the nature of policies, the nature of the state of Israel, the real nature. And if you read the Yinun plan carefully, he says we must take advantage of the fact that what we are is not known. One has to counter that and to expose the nature of policies, what has happened in the region. And to give one example, now this issue of the Al-Hasbani and Wazani was not known, is not known. The issue of capture of water resources of the region and the reason why it was done to promote ongoing colonial settlements. As you know, those settlements are endless. They have never ended because the world is not aware of what is the real nature of the Zionist entity. The real task is...
And the real ambitions.
The real ambitions, the real task is to expose the real objective of this entire exercise.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this. It was a very important paper that you actually delivered, ma'am, at this conference. The conference sense is very important to take place at this point in time to explain, particularly that Lebanon has discovered new oil resources in the sea, and we have all this kind of conflicting issues when it comes to the demarcation of the maritime borders and then linking them to the land borders and boundaries. What is the last thing you can say in 30 seconds?
The immediate task is Lebanon has an excellent case both in terms of its maritime resources and in terms of its river water resources. But Lebanon has to put that into the forward so that the bar of international public opinion can react to these facts. And my personal belief is that an expert commission comprising of hydraulic experts, diplomats, international jurists should be constituted to immediately get across a report on the situation both in terms of the maritime zones as well as on its case, its excellent legal case which Lebanon has on the issue of exercising sovereignty over its water resources.
Very good. Nilfer Bhagwat, Indian Professor of Law and Vice President of the Indian Association of Lawyers. Many thanks indeed for joining us again, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Always welcome, ma'am. Pure pleasure. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل تابعونا على صفحات السوشيال ميديا من كل فريق عمل البرنامج من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.